doing jingles when I started dating him. He had already kind of started doing that. He did some local things. He did several that were on the radio for quite a few years, and a lot of people that we know in the area, you know, never knew they were his actually for a long time. And it was something I know he learned how to do at Dick Grove, so that was part of the reason he probably did it. And trying to make music and get money for it in this area, it made sense to start doing jingles. So he did them for quite a while, but he kind of did them on and off. He did them when we first dated, and again, he worked on some when we were in Nashville that actually were for people up here. And he did some almost probably 6 years ago. He did around then. He did his last one. So through the years, he would keep doing some every once in a while for local businesses. And he was, poor Dave was kind of stuck with me when he did jingles because I sort of shamed him into not using other vocalists. So sometimes he'd have more than one vocalist, but I kept telling him, you know, you don't have to pay me. I'm cheap. So he would work with me, let me work most of the time on his jingles and sing background or sing them. So I think the last one he did was for a photographer, and I thought it was very creative because it had a lot of the clicking sounds like a camera. He worked into the background of it. I thought it was really clever. So I think they were cool for Dave because he got to not only write music but try to be real creative with how the jingle went, so it really helped describe the business with the sounds. I think that's what a good jingle does. So I did that for a few years, but it's not a good money maker. So, and I think Dave did what I now see the musicians doing a lot is if you're going to just do music and not anything else, unless you're incredibly successful in one area, you have to reinvent yourself all the time. You have to do a lot of things. So musicians now will have more than one band they play in. They'll have a lot of different configurations of what they do. And Dave did jingles, he did albums, he recorded people, he wrote, he arranged, and then he got into sound at Czars for 8 years. So to stay in that business, you have to just go with the flow and where there's work, really. And he could do that. That drove me crazy because I was used to a check every week. And he could do that, you know, like a lot of people do that are in the type of business where you don't get a paycheck every week. You just learn to wait until the money comes in, you know. And he was never nervous about it. It's crazy. It's crazy.
I met Dave in a place called Pianos Plus. This was a little music store that was down on Red Arrow Highway when I was in my teens. And of course, seeing a music store open up was a big deal around here because there was really not much. And so I went to check out this place, and Dave was there, and he used to work there during the daytimes. And so I'd hang out there and check out the drum machines and all the things I dream about, you know, owning someday or making music with. And Dave was always there, kind of chilled out, hanging out, smoking cigarettes outside, coming in and just kind of sharing little bits of wisdom here and there with the young up-and-comers. And it was a good influence to have somebody like him there. It definitely made me, as a young guy, feel welcome in the store like that. So he was a great salesperson, and we formed a friendship. I'm trying to remember how exactly I introduced Dave to Brian, or whether it was just through the shows that I was doing. Brian came to see the Chronology concert that I mentioned, and Dave played for that. So he might have met Dave through that concert. And I'd been doing recording in my apartment, and every once in a while when I needed an extra mic preamp or something, you know, for something special, Dave was always great about kind of, you know, letting me borrow something just so I could get the show on the road. So I'm not sure whether Brian actually met Dave through some of the early recordings that I did in my upstairs bedroom apartment on Michigan Avenue, or whether it was through the show, the Chronology concert. But I think somewhere along those roads is where the guys met.
What happened was I was working with a gentleman named Dave Carlock, who had produced some songs for me in the studio, and Dave moved away, and I'm like, where am I going to find somebody that knows how to record, is a musician, can play multiple instruments, all that. And Dave Karlik was like, I got the guy for you, Dave Mackey. And, you know, I thought about that. It was actually a couple of years, and I kept him in the back of my mind. I had kind of put music on hold. And then when I was ready to, I sort of made a decision in my mind that, you know, I'm getting to the age where it's either I'm going to go for the music or I'm going to just kind of do something else. And I said I'm going to go for it. And I was living in St. Joe, Benton Harbor, Michigan at the time. And that name came back to me. I don't even know how I remembered it. And so I looked him up in the phone book. I called him up. I said, I want to come over and I want to talk music. And Dave, like Dave, says, come on over. Didn't even ask me any questions about trying to qualify whether I was worth his time to talk to or whether what the music was about. Dave is all about just music and creativity and openness. And so I went over, and then from that point on, he and I, you know, did multiple CDs, and it was just really a musical, heavenly relationship from that point on. Yeah, so he definitely played on every single one of them. And not only just played keyboards, which is I think what a lot of people know him for, at least what I knew him for, but in many cases he played bass. And what was interesting, you know, is I think when you do a studio project and you don't record the whole band at one time, it feels like you've kind of Frankensteined it together. Maybe the average listener doesn't notice, but I think those of us that record go, yeah, that was not recorded together. It was sort of pieced together. What was great about Dave was we did piece it together, but because he played keyboards and bass and, you know, and not just piano, but multiple strings and all that stuff, when he put it together, it sounded like it was this whole awesome band that just kind of miraculously showed up and laid it down in one track.
Brian went down to Mexico, and we knew about it about, seems like it was 7 or 8 months before it was going to happen, because Brian is a great marketer for himself. It's kind of sales and marketing is what he does, so it helps, I think. So they had this gig all set up to go down to play in Mexico, and David really never been out of the country. When he lived in California, he might have gone over into Mexico a couple times, but this was his first big trip like that. And of course I couldn't go because of work. So the guys all flew down there, and Dave, he absolutely loved it. Tons of pictures from there. He just thought it was beautiful country, and I called him. We talked about every day or two, and he just had a great time.
He didn't take anything too seriously or too funny. I mean, he just was kind of this awesome sort of constant feel-good throughout. And it always makes me feel good when I'm able to share great experiences with people I like and care about. And so to have Dave on that tour musically was great for me. I think for Dave, he was able to see a place that he wouldn't have normally gotten to go and see and experience things he wouldn't normally have gotten to see. And watching him, like his favorite thing was near the hotel, there was this taco stand built out of an old VW bus, right? So, you kind of felt like they would just pull up and then the side would open and then here's tacos. That was a ritual, and I'll never forget that of, midnight we would get, Dave was like, I'm going down to the taco stand. So we'd all, no matter how tired we were or whatever, we'd all leave the hotel, walk a few blocks down to the taco stand. And the other thing I think that I remember about Dave too is we decided to do some out-of-the-way, non-touristy things. So we went to this restaurant, resort, totally out of the way in Tulum. And I think one of our favorite moments, and his too, was having ceviche, which he loved. And I know he came back and experimented and did all different types of ceviche when he got back.
He told a story of the first night they stayed in this little hotel. There was no TV, no internet, electricity, bed, food and drinks. And they sat out in the front of the door just outside the hotel, and they started doing like a little unplugged thing and playing. And so all the people walking by would stop. I think they even maybe put a little hat out and people put change in there. I'm not sure if that part was true, but it was just, Dave loves the Mexican culture, so it was great fun for him to go there. And then after that, they played in they were resorts, so they were just beautiful places. And there's pictures he took pictures of the sink and, you know, the bedding, and he wanted to come home and show me how beautiful it was. It's like, usually I take pictures of the bathroom, not, you know, Dave, but it was just beautiful, Lee. And they had a great time, just great group of guys. So they had a wonderful time in Mexico. Mr. Ed really started when Dave and Tim and Lindsay wanted to play more of their own music and get a little more jazzy. And they decided to form a band, and they got Ed to join them, Ed Sherdahl. So they were just a four-piece, and they started getting together and writing songs. And when they had enough to get started, after they practiced, they started playing around. And after about a year, it seems, or so, was when they started recording their first album, Jump in the Pool, which was really exciting. And everybody wrote music. Tim did, Lindsay and Dave did. And they started adding members as they started going along. They decided to get a bass player because in the beginning it was a four-piece, but Tim played sax. So whenever he did his sax solo, he would just kind of move his bass over a little bit, and Dave would start playing bass on the keyboard, and then Tim would do his sax piece. There's great pictures and videos of him trying to play sax with this bass hanging from him. And they were sort of, I don't know, that's just the way they started, and they didn't know a bass player, and so they just did it together and made it work.
With the three of us, Tim and Dave and I were the core, and then we got Ed to play drums, and we kind of got together over at Ed's house and, you know, set everything up and wondered, okay, now what do we do? And, you know, we decided we wanted to do our own stuff and go a little more, not so mainstream. Still played some hits, but then Dave had written some, I had written some already, so we had a couple original songs already. And then Dave and I got together and wrote some tunes together. And that's what I really miss. I really do.
Eventually the band was Mr. Ed and Lindsay Moreau, myself. Well, it started again with me playing bass sometimes. I don't know why'd all the bass players move away. So I was playing bass, but when Dave wrote a song that he wanted to have sax on, I'd play sax and he'd reach up and play keyboard. Sometimes in the middle of the same song, we'd switch off. And so at first we just had four of us, Lindsay, Ed, myself, and Dave, Ed Sherdahl. And again, we're just putting music together. We're going to play it out and do all that. And so we started, like I said, we started getting recording equipment together, and I'd bought a 16-track TEAC and a board that was at my house where we rehearsed, and we just started saying, Dave said, well, why aren't we running that thing? So we're practicing, and the tape's rolling, and we're going, and we're starting to put songs together and stuff. And so we decided that we'd make an album, and before that, we went to WNIT and performed it. And there's a tape of that. I can't find a real good quality of it, but there's a videotape of that. And we played on TV, and you can see Dave and I switching off on bass, and the music, we were putting it together pretty well then. I can't remember if we did that before or right after we made the recording.
Mr. Ed came about for me. The boys had already been playing for about a year, and my mom had just passed away, and you know, it was kind of in a stupor. And Lindsay, the guitar player, always had a little summer gathering out at his house, and they had called me to come out and jam with them. I didn't really feel like I was kind of a sad sack, and but you know, went out there and jammed, and it just kind of sounded good. They had set up some congas and things of that nature, and that's what I was jamming on while Ed was playing the tubs. And at the end of the night, they asked if I wanted to join the group, and it was really, really good. So I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be great." So the money that I got back from my mom was just about enough to cover percussion. Bought my percussion, my congas, and headed out for about 17, 18 years with them. The making of the album was an outstanding experience. David was just so into it. It was a group effort, but David was really, solid behind it. Everyone was just real excited with the projects. Everyone really was at their best. A lot of things that when Tim was recording, I'd be in there and I'd hear something that he thought was terrible, and David and I just looked at each other and says, "No, man, that was right on. We're keeping that." So it was just kind of back and forth, everyone working together, and just a really good experience, and I think came out with a pretty good product.
All in Love reunions, I think, really grew out of some of the jam sessions that were happening. From time to time, people would come in and there'd be jam sessions in Tommy's garage, and all kinds of people would come and play. And then one year Fred was in town and he came in, and it was even more fun, and because Scotty was coming in like in the early 90s, I think, but it was still kind of just whatever, just get a groove and sit on it or play some old tune. And then Fred came in and we tried some old All in Love, tunes, and the idea kind of came about, well, why don't we try to do something with this? And so it kind of started growing through emails, and we said, well, we'll just set it up we'll get it together. We found Jeff Petrosky, who had disappeared for 20 years, and everybody was still playing.
One year we decided, I think it was 2003 or something, I said to someone, why aren't we doing something? People would love to hear us play. And we did put that together and play in 2004 with the core members. And we had, at that time, Tom Gillespie's band open for us. Dave was working sound at Czars. And Tom Gillespie's band opened, and we kind of headlined, and we had so much fun that we decided to do it the next year. And that's when Fred and I decided, well, we need more people. Why don't we get, even though Dave, Tim, Chuck, Kay were not in the original band, they were musician friends of ours, and we said, well, that's perfect, let's get all of them. So that's kind of how that reunion thing came about. Starting with, 2005 is when we started with Dave and all the others, 2005, 7, 9, and then this year now.
The original trumpet players from All in Love weren't there, and that's actually what Dave did, is he played the trumpet parts on the keyboard and used a voice-actuated thing that was tied into his keyboard and made it so he could breathe and play the notes with his fingers, and it ended up sounding like a trumpet coming out, so it was pretty cool. But he also, we evolved that as time went on. The All in Love show has been, I think we've done 5 of them now, and by the second one, he was already playing keyboard parts too as well, and we all took it in our own directions, and everybody kind of became All in Love, but little solo sections of it that went real well.
So when Fred finally called me up and said, "What do you think about doing a job for real?" I remember my first reaction was, yeah, I'd be willing to give that a go. My second reaction was, we got to get the guys behind us in on this, because during the jams they've been playing, they've been adding, and they'll add to the sound. And it just sort of organically came about from there. And then the first time worked well enough so that Fred then said, okay, instead of 1 set 1 night, let's go for 3 sets 2 nights. And it just sort of took off from there. And it's been amazing in more than one sense, because to me, in this current iteration of All in Love, the band sounds better. it actually sounds better than it did back in the day because we've all grown a bit musically and have realized when to play and when not to play, and we're not trying to jam everything in. But there's also this very, very deep sense of family and connectivity on a personal level that, I mean, we were all buds back in the day and when we first went round, but this is now, these people are truly family to me, each and every one of them. I tell people this is like the musical version of a band of brothers. It's that deep, and it's just incredible. I mean, how lucky is it to every couple of years get together with some 10-odd people that you absolutely love to be with, and then on top of it, you get to play in one of the best bands you've ever been in for 2 nights to a packed house. How can you lose? I mean, it's like, thank you.
So everyone agreed upon it and set up to do something, and with the first project, I think we raised to buy a bench for the municipal band. They were redoing the band shell. So if you go down there, you'll find an All in Love with everyone's name on it, that we raised enough money to help buy a bench. And after that, just kind of grew it every other year and help the cats and dogs now.
Maxon Struan Mike Struan was someone that Dave and actually Ty Maxon were 2 kids compared to us that Dave knew from doing sound at Czars for like 8 years. And he had moved away, Mike had moved away and came back into the area and got in touch with Dave. And Dave had just stopped doing sound at Czars, so he was kind of free. And Mike said, would you play keyboard with us? So here's this old man playing keyboard with Mike, and you know, they were all, I believe they're in their late 20s, maybe early 30s now. And Dave was incredibly excited that a younger guy in the music scene would want him to come play with them. So he has a lot of originals and plays a lot of different styles of music in that band and in what he does all the time. So he played with them, and really good band. Dave had a great time playing with him. And Mike, being the lead guy in the band, Mike has his ideas of what the band should sound like, and he kind of gave specific instructions to Dave that Dave could play organ, sound, and like one other, piano.
He played keys, you know, and you know, he had like 3 big keys, and I kind of, with Maxon Struan, I was trying to make it more of an organic sound, like more organ and piano, and you know, he loves to get synthesizer and stuff. So, you know, I a few times were like, I don't know if I really want to go into the synth level, into that I call it the 80s sound. And he was cool about it, you know, he did no ego, you know, no, he didn't take hard feeling to that at all, which is also nice, you know, as a friend and a musician, to kind of leave your ego at the door when you're going to play.
And that was it, no fancy stuff. And so that immediately was a challenge for Dave. So Dave gradually worked over the couple years that he played with them, and he started getting some of the synthesizers sounds in, and started bringing his Moog with him. And he would, when he'd get home, I'd say, did he say anything about, you know, what you played? He goes, no, I got away with it. At the end, he didn't say, more organ, Dave, just organ, Dave. You know, in the beginning, he would say, really, just organ, Dave? And Dave would go, okay. And then he'd play a little more, and he loved that musical challenge of helping a younger musician go out of their box and look at something different. So that was a great joy for Dave to be part of that. Yeah, they were really good to Dave.
And we started playing and just kind of hit it off, because I never really had a chance to actually play with Dave. It was just him being behind the board, mixing our sound and doing the lights too, because that was, you know, his thing was, you know, sound, and he would do the full light effect, and he would do a great job with, and that was, I mean, that's, being in the band with him was a way for me to get to know him more on a personal level and a musical level. But I mean, I really got to know him from going back to Czars and playing at Czars so many times, and him really being attentive sound guy and really like getting into it, you know. And I mean, and I'm not just saying this, like our best sound was when Dave was, you know, behind the board mixing it, because he cared, you know. And I don't think he always cared for some of the bands, and I don't know if they would say the same thing, but I know for me personally, and the other guys in my band, first it was Steamboat, then Pura Vida, and especially Pura Vida when we got better, I think he cared a little bit more, because like, okay, they're getting better, so I'll pay a little more attention to this, because that was one thing. Dave never had a problem with telling you that something didn't sound good, and I respected him a lot for that. And after, you know, like we'd play a set. This is when he would actually be the sound guy. You know, we'd play a set, we'd take a break, and in the back room, you know, he would we'd convene, you know, and he'd come back and, you know, how things are sounding. Oh, they're sounding good up there. It's like, so how things are sounding out there? And he'd be like, well, you know, you need to turn down that guitar, you know. And I respected him a lot for that, because he would not beat around the bush. He would, yeah, he'd just tell you how it is.
Chick Corea was Dave Mackey's musical hero, and through the years, he has seen him perform many, many times. When we lived in Nashville, if he was going to be in town, we had to try to get tickets to go. Anywhere he came within a 200-mile radius of Dave Mackey, his alarm went off, he knew he was coming, we needed to get tickets. Through the years, he has never been able to meet him. So that was always a big deal to him. And in, I believe it was 2007, I'm thinking the summer, we went to see Return to Forever. And Dave had talked me into, he had this idea. Dave always had a plan when he wanted something. So he wanted a new keyboard, or he wanted a mixer, or he wanted to go see Chick. There was the plan, and then he slowly told me the information till I was on board. So Return Forever was making this tour, and Dave says, you know, Lee, we're getting like $1,000 back as a economic stimulus, and we need to spend the money to help the economy. So I want to go. They're going to be, Return to Forever is going to be in Chicago and Detroit and Indy. It's 3 nights in a row, and I think we should just go. And I did it. So we went to Chicago with Tim, and then we drove the next day to Detroit and met Roger Burns. That was the last time we saw him. And then we drove halfway to Indy, got to Indy, and we had VIP tickets there. So he not only talked me into doing this, but he talked me into buying these $400 tickets to do a VIP just so he could meet Chick. So we get there, it was very exciting. You get dinner, and there's other people there that foolishly spent that much money too. And there was a little tour of the stage, so he got to see Chick's keyboards really, really close. It was like all he could do to not touch them. And see his Moog, which was different than what anybody else could buy, and talk to the tech guy that helped him. And then there was a meet and greet. And we went to the meet and greet, and Stanley Clark, the bass player, was there, and the drummer was there. I can't remember his name. But Chick didn't come. And Dave was he was just like, I'm not going to be disappointed. I'm not going to be disappointed. But he was so disappointed that Chick wasn't there. And we got up there, and they take your pictures, and they were just kind of chatting, and Dave goes, you know, this is the 3rd night we've seen you in a row. And they're like, really? And they turn around and they start talking to us, and they thought it was so cool that we were following them. And we had front row tickets, and during the performance, Stanley Clark goes, and there's a couple here who's followed us for 4 nights. And I keep going, 3. It was only 3. And they go, well, they stand up, and people are clapping, and we stand up, and Chick comes over and shakes Dave's hand and says, wow, you guys, this is so cool. And he goes back to the keyboard, and he brought him some of his gum. It's his favorite gum. And we each took a piece, and we foolishly gave a piece away. But Dave saved 1 piece, you know, in honor of Chick Corea. And it was just a great experience, and he was so hyped. And when Dave got sick, I found out about a Chick concert very close in the Chicago area, and decided that we should go, and we got the Mackies and the Kings to go with us because Dave, I believe it was after he had brain radiation, and he was very tired, but he was still, had his weight on and was eating decently. And we decided to go and see Chick, you know, maybe one more time. And I worked really, really hard on finding people that could help me so that Dave could finally really meet him. So I contacted people I knew that maybe knew people in the music business. I contacted Dave Bartz and a guy through Brian Lubeck that did jazz, smooth jazz in Chicago. And he got us in touch with the people at the venue who emailed me and said, we're going to try to make this happen. So I didn't want to tell Dave because he'd been disappointed before. So we went there, and we went downtown Chicago, and we get to the hotel, and we're waiting, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting for someone to call me and let me know. And they called and said, it's a go, and you can meet him at intermission. And so I'm jumping up and down in the room, and I couldn't decide whether to tell Dave or not. And it ended up okay. I waited, and they told me we were going to meet him. And so during the intermission, we got to go downstairs, and Dave got to tell his musical hero how much he meant to him. I think Chick knew he was sick, and he was so gracious. He told him to keep writing. And we talked about composing, and he invited him to see him in New York. It was a great day.